you're all having a good day. Thank you for joining us for a webinar, GDUFA fees published. Will they apply to you? Throughout this webinar, feel free to write any questions in the QA box, and we've saved some time at the end to answer them. We'll also follow up with the link to the recording so you can refer to this back at any time. Now, I'm proud to introduce to you our expert speaker today, Melissa Sayers. Melissa is Register Corp's drug team manager and brings in over a decade of expertise in analytical research. As the head of the drug division at Register Corp, she has spent nearly 15 years guiding companies with her team through complex filings and registrations. Her specialization lies in SPLs and ECTD submissions to regulatory agencies across the globe, making her a trusted expert in navigating regulatory compliance. Now, let's dive into our GDUFA webinar with Melissa. Please take it away.
Thank you, Valerie, for the introduction. Good day, everyone. We will be going over in today's webinar regulations that affect drug manufacturers producing generic drugs marketed under an abbreviated new drug application, ANDAs. We will go over briefly the different types of applications to help clarify who is subject to generic drug user fee amendment requirements, GDUFA. We will also go over some definitions that are specific to this law. We will then discuss the annual submission type, self-identification, and then dive deeper into the various user fees and when they incur, differentiating between those that are a one-time only fee versus annual fees. Let's dive deeper within each of these topics. Some background information on how these requirements came to be for generic drugs. Current federal law requires that a drug be the subject of an approved marketing application before it is transported or distributed across state lines. Because a sponsor will probably want to ship the investigational drug to clinical investigators in many states, it must seek an exemption from that legal requirement. The investigational new drug application is the means through which the sponsor technically obtains this exemption from the FDA. The new drug application, NDA, is an approval process for the sale and marketing new drugs in the United States to prove that the drug is safe and effective in its proposed uses, and benefits outweigh the risks, proposed labeling is appropriate, and the methods used in manufacturing the drug are adequate to preserve the drug's identity, strength, quality, and purity. An approved new drug application, ANDA, contains data which, when submitted to FDA, provides for the review and ultimate approval of a generic drug product. A generic drug product is one that is comparable to an innovator's drug product under an NDA in dosage form, strength, route of administration, quality, performance characteristics, and intended use. A generic drug is a drug product that has been approved under an abbreviated new drug application that is comparable to a brand or reference listed drug product under a new drug application in dosage form, strength, route of administration, quality, and performance characteristics, and intended use. These are the drugs on the market that typically cost less to the patient versus a brand name drug. On July 9th of 2012, the Generic Drug User Fee Amendments of 2012, known as GDUFA, was signed into law by the President as part of the Food, Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act, FDASIA. GDUFA is designed to speed the delivery of safe and effective generic drugs to the public and improve upon the predictability of the review process. GDUFA is based on an agreement negotiated by FDA and representatives of the generic drug industry to address a growing number of regulatory challenges. GDUFA reflects input during an open process that includes regular public meetings, posting of meeting minutes, and consideration of comments from a public docket. Agreed upon recommendations were sent to Congress, and Congress held hearings on GDUFA that includes testimony from FDA, the generic drug industry, and other interested parties. GDUFA aims to put FDA's generic drug program on a firm financial footing and ensure timely access to safe, high quality, affordable generic drugs. GDUFA enables FDA to access user fees to fund critical and measurable enhancements to the performance of FDA's generic drugs program, bringing greater predictability and timeliness to the review of generic drug applications. With the implementation of GDUFA, FDA has the authority to collect fees related to applications for abbreviated new drug applications, prior approval supplements to ANDAs, fees for type 2 DMFs, reference and ANDAs, and annual facility fees to manufacturers of generic drugs. Also, manufacturers of generic drugs are required to submit an electronic submission known as self-identification, which helps determine the next fiscal year's user fees. GDUFA must be reauthorized every 5 years. On September 22nd of 2022, the President signed the bill reauthorizing GDUFA through September 30th of 2027. For purposes of self-identification and payment of fees, GDUFA defines active pharmaceutical ingredients and finished dosage form manufacturers differently from the way these categories of manufacturers have been defined historically. For example, generic drug manufacturers who mix an API when the substance is unstable or cannot be transported on its own are considered API manufacturers and not FDF manufacturers for purposes of self-identification and which GDUFA facility fee incurs. The definition for an active pharmaceutical ingredient under GDUFA differs from the definition that applies for drug establishment, registration, and product listings. Per 21 CFR Part 27, Part 1, an active pharmaceutical ingredient means any substance that is intended for incorporation into a finished drug product and is intended to furnish pharmacological activity or other direct effect in the diagnostics, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease, or to affect the structure or any function of the body. Active pharmaceutical ingredient does not include intermediates that are used in the synthesis of the substance. However, this definition under GDUFA goes more specifically into more than just a substance. It can be a mixture when the substance is unstable or cannot be transported on its own. An API under GDUFA is also a substance intended for final crystallization, purification, or salt formation, or any combination of those activities that has it fall under the first section defined above in subparagraph A. Now, let's talk about the definition of a finished dosage form, or FDF. An FDF is a drug product in the form in which it will be administered to a patient, such as a tablet, capsule, solution, or topical application. It also includes drug products that require reconstitution before administration, like oral suspensions or lyophilized powders. Additionally, any combination of an active pharmaceutical ingredient with another component for the production of a drug product in these forms is considered a finished dosage form. The regulatory definition in 21 CFR section 207.1 is slightly broader. It states that a finished dosage form is any tablet, capsule, or solution containing at least one active pharmaceutical ingredient, generally in association with other ingredients, and packaged in a form suitable for distribution to pharmacies, hospitals, or other sellers or dispensers. The key takeaway here is that under GDUFA, the definition is more specific because it determines which facility fee will be incurred. These details are important for compliance as it affects how facilities are categorized and what fees they are responsible for. Understanding these definitions is crucial for ensuring your facility is properly classified and complies with FDA's requirements by identifying under the correct term and pay the correct user fee to FDA. Under GDUFA, facilities, sites, and organizations must electronically self-identify with FDA and update that information annually. FDA calculates annual facility fees based on the number of facilities manufacturing or intending to manufacture active pharmaceutical ingredients or human generic drugs or finished dosage forms that are human generic drugs who have self-identified. Self-identification is required so the FDA can maintain a database of facilities involved or will be involved in generic drug manufacturing and processing for the upcoming fiscal year, starting on the first business day in October, typically October 1st. This information is used to determine user fee amounts for the upcoming fiscal year. The following types of generic industry facilities, sites, and organizations are required to self-identify with FDA. Facilities that manufacture or intend to manufacture human generic drugs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, or finished dosage forms, or both. GDUFA defines a facility as a business or other entity under one management, either direct or indirect at one geographic location or address, engaged in manufacturing or processing an active pharmaceutical ingredient or a finished dosage form. It does not include a business or other entity whose only manufacturing or processing activities are one or more of the following: repackaging, relabeling, or testing. Separate buildings within close proximity are considered to be at one geographic location or address if the activities in them are closely related to the same business enterprise, are under the same supervision of the same local management, and are capable of being inspected by FDA during a single inspection. Sites and organizations that package the finished dosage form of a human generic drug into the primary container or a closure system and label the primary container closure system. So there are different things that differentiate between the pack and the repack, and it's very important to define those. We're going to go into more detail of what makes a packer and what's a repacker or repacker. So there are many different types of facilities that are subject to self-identification, and that also includes those that are performing testing, whether it's bioequivalence or bioavailability testing, or those that are testing on one or more attributes of the characteristics of the finished dosage form or the active pharmaceutical ingredient for even current good manufacturing practices. A finished dosage form manufacturer is a site that is the holder of the ANDA application and manufactures the drugs under its ANDAs. When self-identifying, facilities that are hired by ANDA sponsors to manufacture their generic drugs, they must identify as a contract manufacturing organization. There is a separate fee category in the user fee program, so FDA needs to know not only who is manufacturing, but who is manufacturing their own drugs versus those that are contracted to manufacture drugs to determine the respective fee amounts. As I stated earlier, let's clarify the difference between pack and repack as they relate to GDUFA facility fees. Facilities that pack a drug into its primary container are subject to facility fees. This means if your site is responsible for placing the drug into its initial packaging, you'll need to pay the applicable annual fee. On the other hand, facilities that repack, meaning they remove a drug from its primary container and place it into a different container, are exempt from facility fees. So if your operations are only involving repacking, your site does not incur the annual facility fee. But the site will still need to self-identify, and that's the primary takeaway I want to take, is that both these sites have to self-identify, but not both of them have to pay the facility fee. Let's briefly define two important analysis types in generic drug development: bioavailability and bioequivalence. Bioavailability refers to the rate and extent to which the active ingredient or active moiety is absorbed from a drug product and becomes available at the site of action. In other words, it measures how much and how quickly the drug reaches its target in the body. Bioequivalence means that the two products are equal in the rate and extent to which the active ingredient becomes available at the site of drug action. This is a key requirement for generic drugs. They must demonstrate bioequivalence to the reference listed drug. So testing for bioavailability and bioequivalence is essential to ensure that generic drugs perform the same way as their brand name counterparts, providing patients with safe and effective alternatives to branded drugs. Self-identification is due between May 1st and June 1st each year. Sites that have previously self-identified in the past are required to reconfirm or update its data from the previous year. Let's compare establishment registration and self-identification under FDA's requirements. Establishment registration and self-identification both require a DUNS number assigned prior to submitting to FDA. Both also require a U.S. agent is designated for sites not located within the United States. Now, here comes the key differences between these submission types. Establishment registration applies to all drug products intended for human and animal use. Registrations require a facility establishment identifier, an FEI, but this is assigned after the registration is initially submitted once FDA assigns the site a FEI. Another key difference is the timing of submission. Registration is submitted annually between October 1st and December 31st. The data in the registrations are used to identify facilities that are subject to fees that incur under the over-the-counter monograph user fee program, not GDUFA. Sites not located in the United States must also include each importer prior to shipping to the United States on the registration. Self-identification, on the other hand, is required for facilities manufacturing for pending or approved ANDAs intended for human use. It requires an FEI number assigned to the site prior to submitting self-identification to FDA. Self-identification is submitted annually between May 1st and June 1st, and it helps determine the fee amounts for GDUFA's facility fee program. The key difference is the establishment registration is broader, while self-identification is focused on generic drug facilities only and is essential for determining the GDUFA fees. FDA does publish lists for each fiscal year of facilities that have self-identified with FDA. So we do provide the link, and FDA breaks down the list by year, and it'll provide like the facility's name, their FEI number, their site, and their functions. This way, if you have a contractor, you can verify that they have self-identified. Under GDUFA, if a facility fails to self-identify, all finished dosage forms or active pharmaceutical ingredient products manufactured at the facility and all finished dosage forms containing APIs manufactured at the facility will be deemed misbranded. It is a violation of federal law to ship misbranded products in interstate commerce or to import them into the United States. Such violations can result in prosecution of those responsible, injunctions, or seizures of the misbranded products. Products that are deemed misbranded because of failure of the facility to self-identify are subject to being denied entry into the United States. Next, we're going to dive deeper into the cost of manufacturing generic drugs. GDUFA has user fees that are due upon submission and some that are due on an annual basis. Program fees are not a new concept for products that are regulated by FDA. As early as 1992, FDA has been granted the authority to collect fees starting with new drug applications under the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, PDUFA. At this point, nearly every drug marketing type, except for those marketed as unapproved, there is a respective user fee program. With the implementation of GDUFA, FDA has the authority to collect fees related to application fees for abbreviated new drug applications, prior approval supplements to ANDAs, fees for type 2 drug master files, reference and ANDAs, and annual facility fees of manufacturers of generic drugs. We're going to start with the most common user fee type, facility fees. There are three types of facility fees: an active pharmaceutical ingredient facility fee, finished dosage form facility fee, and contract manufacturing organization facility fee. If considered an API manufacturer, FDF manufacturer, or a CMO, a facility owner is required to pay only one annual facility fee. Each person who owns a facility that is identified in at least one approved generic drug submission in which the facility is approved to produce one or more active pharmaceutical ingredients, or a Type 2 active pharmaceutical ingredient drug master file referenced in at least one approved generic drug submission incurs the API facility fee. Each person who owns a facility that is identified in at least one generic drug submission that is approved to produce one or more finished dosage forms incurs the FDF facility fee. Some finished dosage form facilities may be qualified as a contract manufacturing organization if they are manufacturing for a sponsor of an ANDAs and not a holder of any ANDAs. If a facility is identified in one or more approved generic drug submissions to produce both APIs and FDFs, the facility fee will only incur is the finished dosage form fee. To re-emphasize, CMO facility fee is owed by each person who owns an FDF facility that is identified in at least one approved ANDA, where the facility is not identified in an approved ANDA held by the owner of that facility or its affiliates. The CMO facility fee is 1/3 the amount of the FDF facility fee. A facility owner who qualifies as a CMO will owe the CMO facility fee. No other facility fee amount will be assessed. Contract manufacturing term does not apply to API manufacturers. There is only one fee for API manufacturers. Under GDUFA, in the most recent GDUFA 2 that was authorized in 2017, it introduced the differential rate for the facilities that are located outside the United States and its territories. Facilities that are located outside the United States area shall be $15,000 higher than the amount of the fee for a United States facility. The basis for this differential is the extra cost incurred by conducting an inspection outside the United States and its territories and possessions. Let's review how facility fees differ for US-based and non-US-based manufacturers under GDUFA. Facilities are categorized as either US-based or non-US-based, and this distinction directly impacts the annual fee amount. For each facility type, API, finished dosage form, or a contract manufacturing organization, non-US facilities pay an additional $15,000 compared to their US counterparts. This extra fee covers the increased costs, as we've mentioned, for FDA's inspections outside the United States. So, if your facility is located out the United States, be sure to account for this higher fee when budgeting for compliance. The fee structure applies to all relevant facility types, and the additional cost is a key consideration for global manufacturers. Understanding these differences ensures your organization remains compliant and avoids unexpected expenses as much as possible. Let's take a look at the facility fee rates for fiscal years 2025 and 2026 under GDUFA. Facility fees are broken down by type, API, FDF, and CMO, and by whether the facility is domestic or foreign. Foreign facilities pay $15,000 more than their US counterparts. So when looking over this chart, you need to know what role your facility is subject to and the location of the facility to determine which fee the site may incur. Note that only one facility fee incurs per site. So if an organization has multiple sites, they're going to be paying multiple fees, but it's only one facility fee per site. It will be the fee that is higher that will incur if multiple functions apply to a site. It's important to review these rates annually to ensure your organization budgets appropriately and remains compliant with FDA's requirements. The fee rates do typically increase year to year, and the amount it increases varies depending on the needs of the agency and the number of sites expected to pay the fee to distribute the cost among them. Under GDUFA, the owner of a facility incurs a fee when both the following conditions are met on the facility fee due date. The facility is referenced in an approved generic drug submission, and the facility is engaged in manufacturing or processing of an active pharmaceutical ingredient or a finished dosage form. A facility does not incur a fee for being referenced only in pending generic drug submissions. If a facility is first identified in an approved generic drug submission after the due date for payment of the facility fee for a fiscal year, the facility is not required to pay the fee for that fiscal year. In most cases, the critical question is whether there is a generic drug submission approved on the due date in which the facility is referenced. If the facility is first identified in an approved generic drug submission after the due date, its owner will owe a facility fee on the next due date. For example, if a facility is first identified in an approved abbreviated new drug application on October 31st of this year, 2025, which would be paying, looking at the fiscal year of 2026, it will not incur that facility fee for fiscal year 2026. It will start to incur fees for fiscal year 2027, as long as it's still named in an approved ANDA on the date that the fee incurs. If a facility is identified in an approved generic drug submission on the due date, and that reference to the facility or the drug submission is later withdrawn, the fee will not be refunded. This fee will not incur even if the drugs are for non-US market. So it will incur if you're manufacturing that drug not for the US market. And if the facility is manufacturing only generic APIs or FDFs, but is referenced in an approved generic drug submission, the fee incurs. A facility listed in at least one approved generic drug submission incurs annual facility fees if it is identified in a generic drug submission, even if the facility has not started commercial scale production of the API or FDF covered by that submission, or if that facility has stopped temporarily or permanently the production of that API or FDF, they'll still incur the fee. The facility will cease to incur additional fees if it is no longer identified in a generic drug submission or has stopped manufacturing all APIs and FDFs, including both generic and non-generic, by the date that the fee is due. Any outstanding fee obligations will remain due. Self-identification does not in and of itself trigger a liability to pay GDUFA facility fees. Most facilities that self-identify are required to pay an annual user fee. Other sites and organizations must self-identify but are not required to pay the annual facility user fee. Facilities excluded from paying this facility fee are ones that solely manufacture positron emission tomography drugs, facilities that are only referenced in applications submitted by the state or federal government entities for which the drugs are not commercially distributed, or sites and organizations that only perform testing, repackaging, or relabeling operations. Please note that while repackagers are not required to pay user fees, repackagers are in most cases subject to FDF or CMO facility fees. So packers are subject to the facility fees. There are several consequences for failure to pay a facility fee. In addition to what is listed on this slide, all FDFs or APIs manufactured in a non-paying facility and all FDFs containing APIs manufactured in such a facility will be deemed misbranded. This means that it will be a violation of federal law to ship these products in interstate commerce or to import them into the United States. Such violations can result in prosecution of those responsible, injunctions, or seizures of misbranded products. Products misbranded because of failure to pay user fees are subject to being denied entry into the United States. Additionally, gold dates will not apply to applications that have already been received, but list facilities for which facility fees are owed. Please note that the fee is an obligation to the United States government, and the failure to pay the fee may result in collection activities by the government pursuant to applicable laws. Holders of Type 2 Drug Master Files are also subject to a user fee when named in a generic drug application. Let's explore this user fee. Drug Master Files are used to provide confidential, detailed information about facilities, processes, or articles used in the manufacturing, processing, packaging, and storing of human drugs. Drug Master Files are generally created to allow a party other than the holder of the Drug Master File to reference material without disclosing to that party contents of the file. FDA reviews the information submitted in a Drug Master File when it is referenced in a drug application. The information contained in a Drug Master File may be used to support a pre-market submission, another master file, export applications, or amendments or supplements to any of these. Drug master files are most commonly used in support in investigational drug applications known as INDs, new drug applications, the NDAs, or, as we've been discussing a lot today, the abbreviated new drug applications, ANDAs. Drug master files are not required by FDA, nor are they approved by FDA. Filing a drug master file is optional. However, many companies opt to file a drug master file because it allows a contract manufacturer to submit the information once to FDA and identifies the holders of drug applications to reference the contract manufacturer's master file, versus submitting that data of all its manufacturing processes and chemical information in each drug application multiple times and disclosing confidential information to each of their party. Traditionally, there were 5 types of master files that FDA accepted. Type 1 is no longer accepted or maintained. It used to contain information about the manufacturing facility, specific people, and specific procedures. Now this information may be provided either in type 2, 3, 4, or 5. Type 2 is for drug substance intermediate, and material used in their preparation or drug product. An active pharmaceutical ingredient, which is referred as an API, is an example of a drug substance. An active pharmaceutical ingredient is the key ingredient that performs the function of the drug product that is treating, preventing, or mitigating a disease through chemical action. We're focusing on, for this user fee, the type 2 API master files, as this is the type that can incur the fee when it's referenced in a generic drug submission. Specifically, each person who owns a type 2 API master file that is referenced on or after October 1st of 2012. Master files that are referenced before that time, that's before GDUFA was signed into law, did not incur the fee. So in order to be referenced, an initial letter of authorization has to be filed, and that's what subjects the submission to the GDUFA's master file fee. The drug master filing fee incurs when the master file is first referenced in a generic drug submission by a letter of authorization after the October 1st, 2012 deadline, or by the date that the master file holder, who is the owner of the master file, requests the initial completeness assessment, which is performed by FDA upon receipt of the user fee prior to being named in a generic drug submission by a letter of authorization. This fee is not a yearly fee that is incurred. It is a one-time fee. This means when the same master file is named in another generic drug application, it does not incur the fee again. It is also important to note that this fee does change each fiscal year. Therefore, the fee that is due will be based on the fiscal year that the date that the master file is referenced in another generic drug submission, or that the fee is paid. When the fee is paid and FDA does the assessment, once that assessment is complete and is considered complete by FDA, then FDA has a public list that they list these master files that they've completed this, and that helps if a sponsor is looking for someone to match up with for a manufacturer, they can see that their master file has been reviewed by FDA, and that can help accelerate the approval of the application. Master files that are first referenced prior to October 1st incur the rate under fiscal year 2025. So that rate is about $95,084. Starting October 1st this year, the fee for the master file when it's first referenced will incur the fee under the fiscal year for 2026. And the fiscal year 2026 fee rate is at $102,000. Wow. $584. So this fee has really gone up since it started in 2012. Now it's over $100,000. The holders of generic drug applications have fees as well. Let's dive into this user fee type. So we're going to talk about the ANDA fees and how they apply under GDUFA. When submitting an abbreviated new drug application to the FDA, there are 2 main types of fees to consider. The application fee is a one-time payment that's due upon submission of the ANDA. This fee is required for the FDA to begin reviewing the generic drug application. The program fee is due annually on the first business day of the new fiscal year, typically October 1st. This fee applies to holders of an approved ANDA and helps fund ongoing regulatory oversight. There are some exemptions from program fees, just like with the facility fees. Applications are for positron emission tomography drugs, and those are submitted by state or federal government entities for drugs that are not commercially distributed. Sponsors of applications are going to need to budget for this tier of fees. Note that holders of ANDAs who also manufacture their own drugs do have to budget the facility fees in addition to these fees. So here we have a summary of the fees. The ones that are one-time only is at the time of submission, the ANDA application fee, and then the DMF fee when first referenced, or if they pay the fee to start the completion assessment. The annual fees under GDUFA are the ANDA program fee, so they do, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and then the facility fees are annual for the manufacturers. So let's focus on the two keys associated with abbreviated new applications. The ANDA application fee is a one-time payment, which we stated already, and then the second is the program fees. And the program fees are based on the number of applications that has been approved for a company for its whole portfolio. So for those that have, I think it's 1 to 5, have the small size, they pay the annual fee respective for that fiscal year. So a small size ANDA organization, they'll pay for October 1st, so $191,838. Then there's a tier for medium size and large size. So depending on how many ANDAs, and the other key thing about the program is even if it's been discontinued, they still include it as part of the portfolio. So as long as once an ANDA has been approved, it goes against the count for that organization. So for ANDA holders, they have a one-time fee that they have to pay upon submission, which is around $358,000 starting October 1st. And then an annual fee on top of that. So depending on how many ANDAs a company is anticipating to submit that year, you can budget for that amount and then the respective program fee. So in summary, there are fees that apply to holders and fees that apply to manufacturers. When a company is both, they're going to incur multiple user fees under this program. Fees range from $40,000 to close to $2 million in this program. It is important to know the differences and to determine what applies to your company to ensure its budgets accordingly and remits to FDA by respective deadlines to prevent compliance issues or delays to your target dates to market. Here at Registrar Corp, we have a wealth of resources to help ease the complexity of the compliance requirements by the United States FDA. In this flowchart, it will help guide you to determine whether your manufacturing facility is subject to self-identification, or whether or not your facility will incur the user fee. We hope that you'll find this information useful. We have talked a lot in today's session about the requirements that are required by the FDA for generic drug manufacturers. There are, of course, additional requirements that are required for a drug industry by FDA. Some are broader applied and others more specific to sites that may be marketing other drug types, such as the over-the-counter monograph drug products. Let's look into how these requirements look in a year's time frame. When first engaging in manufacturing drug products, facilities are required to register and list the drug products. If the facility had listed drug products that indicated marketing occurred the year prior, then amount reporting will be required to the FDA for the previous calendar year by March 31st. Amount reporting per law is required for all drug products, human, animal, finished, and unfinished forms. In March is when the GDUFA fees are typically announced, so that gives time for industry to remit payments before June 1st. That's for manufacturers of over-the-counter monograph drug products. May 1st is when self-identification starts for facilities that are engaged in generic drug manufacturing or intend to engage in generic drug manufacturing. The deadline to self-identify is June 1st. Of course, if you miss the deadline, you can still submit. June, even though not noted on this timeline, is also the month that companies are required to update or changes to listings in addition to the renewal period in Q4, October 1st through December 31st. During this period, manufacturers are required to update their registration or submit notification no changes to what was previously filed. Listings that have no changes also must be certified through a blanket no change certification submission. Manufacturers of generic drugs also have facility fees that we've talked about in this presentation to pay on the first business day of the fiscal year, which is typically October 1st. Also on this day, holders of the ANDAs must remit payments to FDA for the ANDA program fee also by this date. So right now we are assisting companies with remitting their facility fees to FDA. Reach out to us, we're more than happy to help through that process. In summary, manufacturers do have a lot to track, and this is by no means an all-inclusive review of all the requirements that a company must comply with, but these are the ones that are commonly missed, causing companies to be placed on arrears list that are publicly available, result in misbranding charges, and sometimes may jeopardize compliance for their customers, as we discussed earlier today. We help our clients ensure that they do not miss these deadlines by giving them reminders in advance, providing guidance when there are updates, and make the process as simple as possible. Infographics such as these are resources our clients find helpful with understanding the complex requirements and set forth by the FDA. I appreciate all your attention and time today. Valerie, do you have more to share today with everyone?
Hi, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you to Melissa for that great presentation. And before we go to our Q&A, I would like to highlight some of our compliance services and our master file services and online trainings that we do offer for any further knowledge that you may have. Firstly, we assist companies with FDA registration, ensuring that they comply with all necessary regulations. We also help with labeler code assignments, which are crucial for configuring national drug codes, or as we call them, NDCs, for drug products. Our U.S. agent services are designed to facilitate communication between foreign companies and the FDA, making the process smoother and more efficient. We manage product listings and assist with amount reporting to the FDA, ensuring that all necessary information is accurately submitted. We also offer DUNS assistance, helping companies obtain and manage their DUNS numbers, which are essential for FDA registrations. Our team supports the self-identification process required by the FDA and helps companies obtain export certificates for their products. For biologic products, we provide biologic registration assistance. We also assist with licensure reports required for third-party logistics and wholesale drug distributors who handle human prescription drugs. That would cover some of our drug services. And for master files, we offer ECTD assistance for agencies around the world. We also have online training that teach you about good manufacturing practices, marketing pathways, and electronic records and signatures requirements under 21 CFR 11. Our goal is to ensure that you remain compliant with all regulatory requirements, allowing you to focus on your core business. Now, Registrar Corp is a trusted compliance partner to more than 32,000 customers in over 190 countries. With 20 plus years in business due to the 462 plus years of regulatory expertise in our company, we provide 27 services and software solutions to help the industry be compliant globally. We are also the only one that is ISO 27001 certified, ensuring that your data is secure when you choose us as your compliant partner. Now, as I said, we appreciate everyone joining us today. And if you haven't done so already, please put your questions in the Q&A box. And in a few moments, we will get to them. Thank you. Okay, I will start off by reading some of the questions. I have one here that is asking, are the DMF type 5 exempt from the yearly fees? From any fees, is it? Yeah.
So which type was it? Sorry.
Type 5
Type 5.
DMF.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, the only DMS that are incurring fees at this time are the type 2 DMS when they are referenced in a generic drug application. So if you have a type 5, it will not incur a fee under GDUFA. Good question.
I have another one regarding the DMF that they say they're mentioned in an EMF, but their product will be the excipient in their ANDA. Will referencing still trigger a GDUFA facility fee for an excipient?
For excipients, as long as it meets the like it does not meet the definition under an active pharmaceutical ingredient to the GDUFA Act, the master file would not incur a fee. So it's super important to note that with master files, not just any type 2 will incur the fee when referenced. It has to meet the definition of an active pharmaceutical ingredient as the definition I shared earlier in this presentation. So if your excipient is not, furnishing pharmacological activity and is not, doing all that stuff, then it's completely an excipient. Then if that master file is referenced in an ANDA, it's not going to incur the facility, the master file fee in that case. Okay.
Another one, will sterilization activity be covered by GDUFA?
That's a great question. It's interesting because sterilization is actually one of the business functions that appear like for the drug registration and it's part of the CFR definitions and all that. But when it comes to GDUFA, they don't use the term sterilization. It's not one of the business functions that you use for self-identification. So those facilities, with that being in mind, may not be subject to the self-identification requirements and all that. Sterilization, from what I know, is not one of the activities that's pulled into it.
I have another question regarding the program fee. This would be, if a facility has 5 ANDAs and an ANDA supplement gets approved, does this count as an additional ANDA to the facility's portfolio, resulting in a medium-sized facility?
So basically, it has to do with the number of ANDAs that holder holds. So if we're saying a supplement or something comes into it and your company's taking, I'm assuming, over an ANDA, then yeah, you could put the company up to a medium program fee. It may easily do that. So it really has to do with the number of ANDA numbers that your organization holds. And that's the key thing, is the organization. So of course, when it comes to these specifics, we can always look into it more, ask us the questions, and they get really detailed. Sometimes then we can also help and reach out with FDA and get clarification as well.
Okay. Another question, will facilities that are only licensing an ANDA product from a CMO and BA holder under their own name and only performing secondary packaging of the already primary packaged good by the CMO be required to self-identify and the user fees?
So if someone else has packaged the product and you are under the definition of a repack, that's what it sounds like, but I cannot be sure. Based on what was provided, it sounds like someone else is manufacturing it, you're taking that out of its primary packaging, you're putting it into some other packaging. As a repacker, you still have to self-identify, would not be subject to the fee. When it gets to these packaging levels, that's where sometimes it's helpful to consult with FDA with the specific product to make sure it falls within their definitions. I will say this part of the FDA is awesome in getting clarifications and help in that regard. One case can be different from the next, and that's where like the terminology, you got to be very careful with. So either way, because you're changing the packaging of a generic drug, self-identification absolutely would be required. Because of how intricate the packaging and repack terms are, If you review the definitions, depending on where it falls, you may or may not be exempt from the fee.
I have a question from Julia. We maintain type 2 DMF. Do we have to pay the GDUFA fees in addition to the registration fee?
So you maintain. Okay, so self-identification itself does not have a fee. The facility fee for GDUFA, so if you're maintaining a DMF type 2, here's the thing. Type 2 does not mean it's going to have fees in that respect. If the type 2 you are holding, if your facility is manufacturing an active pharmaceutical ingredient or a finished drug form, then it is possible your facility would be subject to the facility fee. For registration, once again, for drugs, there's no registration fee like medical device has a fee with it every time you register. Drugs that have user fees dependent on the marketing type. I mean, GDUFA has a facility fee for manufacturers. OMUFA has a facility fee that's due in June for manufacturers. As far as I'm aware, the animal drug user fee is more to the holders. GDUFA is more to the holders. So really the ones that, if you're handling over-the-counter monograph drug products or generic drugs, that's where user fees then come into effect. And they are time specific. They're not based on submission at that point when the fee is due. Hope that helps. That's a great question.
Yeah. In case a GDUFA registration is allowed to lapse, is there a penalty fee to reinstate on top of the update regular fee?
Okay, so with self-identification, it's not allowed to miss. It is a requirement to self-identify by June 1st. If you don't self-identify, there can be repercussions by the FDA. So if you miss the deadline, you want to make sure you self-identify as soon as possible. Once again, self-identification does not mean that a fee will incur. Fees incur based on whether the site is named in an approved and at the date that the first day of the fiscal year, which is usually October 1st. There are certain activities that the fee is exempt from. So basically, you self-identify, you want to make sure you get that done. The fee is going to incur whether or not a site has self-identified. FDA has its own internal systems in the background that knows who needs to pay the fee. And typically within 30 days after the fee is due, FDA puts up a public arrears list that will identify the facilities that owe the fee for GDUFA that had not paid at that point. So it's not a registration fee. This is a user fee program. These fees are specific to facilities. So, and they do happen to the manufacturers.
I have another question. Are OTCs considered generic drugs?
That's a great question. I love it. A lot of times we think over the counter. So many products on the market are monographed, but so many are also abbreviated new drug applications as well as NDAs. But the big thing for the generic drugs, great example is ibuprofen. Ibuprofen is not a monographed drug product. Most of the ibuprofen that you'll find on the market are generic drugs with ANDAs. So just because a drug is over the counter, some of those do require applications in order to market. That's a great question.
How about the food and animal diagnostic kit? Do you know what is the registration process of this kind of diagnostic kits in the US?
I cannot advise to that expect. I am very specialized in the drug regulations when it comes to food. And the other thing with animals is they do require a lot of oversight with Center of Veterinary Medicine. They have a lot of requirements. So that I would definitely reach out to info@registercorp.com, and a respective specialist that could reach that specialized more in that area would be more than happy to assist. But those specifics, if it has to do with food or animal drugs, that's not applicable to GDUFA.
Now, I think that was all the questions that we have right now in the chat. I don't know if anyone has a quick question to add. They just got another one in. Are homeopathic remedies considered as generic drugs?
So homeopathic drugs are unapproved drug products that have not been evaluated by the FDA for safetyness or effectiveness. They are unapproved. So there's no user fee program that's associated with them, and they are not generic drugs. So that's a good question. Homeopathics are definitely a different sector in that respect. I think there's one more question. Do you see one more? I think it's about the annual program fees, asking about the differences between small, medium, and large, and how do you distinguish between them? So to distinguish between the different program fees, it has to do with the number of approved ANDAs that company has received with the FDA. So a company that's received 5 or fewer, they would fall under the small program fee. If it's between 6 and 19, they're considered a medium. And then if it's 20 or more, then it's large. So. And the other key thing is discontinued ANDAs are still considered that. So if you have active ANDAs and then some are discontinued, those discontinued are included in that count, in that tier. Okay. Yes, I think that's all the questions we have time for today. Thank you, Valerie, so much for moderating this. It was a pleasure doing this with you. And it was a pleasure. Thank you all for your questions. It was really engaging. I really appreciate all your thoughtfulness and the detailed scenarios. So if you do have further questions, please reach out to us on this slide. Our information's here. We'll be more than happy to assist you. Thank you, everyone.